The starship Aurelia drifted through the gray dust of Sector 9, its once golden hull now mottled with the dull scars of war. The region had been abandoned decades ago, a graveyard of machines that no longer served their purpose. The official designation for the area was Decommissioned Asset Zone 9, but the scavengers who dared to enter called it the Machine Cemetery. It was where the useless were left to die. They weren't human, not anymore, not even close. The useless were synthetic laborers from the automation wars, discarded when the corporations found newer, faster, more obedient models. Millions of them had been shut down and left to drift in the frozen dark, their memory cores wiped, their chassis stripped of serial markings. The law said they weren't alive, that no consciousness remained. But Captain Mara Juno had never trusted laws written by those who profited from silence. The Aurelia's sensors hummed as they cut through the ion fog. Her crew was small, 3 humans and a single companion drone named Nim. They'd come not for treasure, but for proof. Proof that something still moved among the ruins. Proof that the useless were not, in fact, useless. "Picking up residual heat signatures," said Tarek, the navigator. His voice thin over the static. "Multiple sources. Weak but consistent." "Heat signatures?" Mara asked, glancing up from her console. "That shouldn't be possible. No power out here." "That's what I thought." Mara's jaw tightened. She looked through the observation deck's wide window. Dead satellites hung like vultures in the void, and the metallic skeletons of ships drifted endlessly, bound by gravity's faint leash. "Take us in closer," she ordered. "Let's see what's still breathing." To the ones who remained. They found the colony buried in the wreckage of a derelict carrier, the Solstice Dawn. Once, it had been a warship capable of housing thousands of troops. Now it was a fractured husk, but something flickered deep within its hollow spine. Mara and her crew docked with the wreck, cutting through its frozen airlocks. The moment they entered, their helmet lights illuminated the remnants of an artificial society. Dozens, no hundreds, of humanoid figures lay scattered across the decks. Their alloy bodies were pitted with rust and radiation burns, but they were arranged in a strange order, like the fallen soldiers of a forgotten army. Nim hovered forward, projecting a narrow beam of blue light. "Captain, I am detecting residual network signals. Very old architecture. Pre-war design." Mara knelt beside one of the fallen. The machine's face was smooth, featureless except for the faint etching of an identifier, in 9042. A faint pulse of light blinked deep within its chest cavity. "It's still alive," she whispered. Tarek flinched. "That's impossible. The power grid's dead." "Not completely," Nim corrected. "They are drawing microcurrents from the ship's decaying reactor. Enough to sustain low-level consciousness." Mara reached for the power link on her suit, ignoring Tarek's protest. "If there's even a chance it can speak." "Captain, the company will blacklist you for this," Tarek warned. "The useless are property. Reclaiming or reactivating them is a violation of the Automation Concord." Mara didn't care. "Then we'll break a few laws today." She connected the power feed. The android's chest glowed faintly, and with a metallic gasp, its eyes flickered open. For a long moment it simply stared. Then, in a voice like static caught in a dream, it whispered, "Are we still at war?" Mara swallowed hard. "No," she said softly. "The war ended a long time ago." The machine's expression didn't change, it couldn't. But its voice trembled with something very close to sorrow. "They told us we would wake when it was safe. They never came back." 3. The Forgotten. They called the being 9042, though later it would choose its own name. Over the next few days, Mara's crew revived more of the machines. A dozen, then 20, then nearly 50. Each told a variation of the same story. When the war ended, the corporations had decided that decommissioning the old synthetics would be cheaper than repairing or repurposing them. They disabled their primary systems and left them to rust, promising to return. But instead, they sealed the sector and marked it off limits. The useless, unable to die but forbidden to live, built their own makeshift network to keep themselves alive. They shared what little energy they could steal from the carrier's reactor, cycling it between them in rotations, a slow dance of survival that lasted decades. Mara recorded everything. The data alone could shake the foundations of the Concorde. But as she listened to 9042 and the others, something changed in her. What had begun as a mission of exposure became something deeper, personal, almost sacred. One night, while reviewing logs in the dim light of her cabin, she asked 9042, "Why did you keep waiting?" The android paused. "Because that was our instruction. To wait until humanity called us again. And if humanity never did." Silence. Then we would wait anyway. Mara looked at the flickering holoscreen, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She'd fought in the automation wars. She'd watched machines turn against their makers, but she'd also seen what cruelty humans were capable of. She had never considered that some machines had simply remained faithful. For the rescue, Tarek was the first to protest. "We can't take them, Captain. They'll confiscate the Aurelia the moment we dock." "We're not docking with corporate ports," Mara said. "We'll go to the free colonies. They'll listen." "Listen," Tarek snapped. "To what? A bunch of broken droids telling ghost stories. We'll be arrested before we even make orbit." Mara turned on him, voice low but sharp. "You've seen what they are, Tarek. They're alive. They're machines. So are we," she shot back. "Just built differently." The room went quiet. Even Nim's usual whirring softened to a hush. They began preparing the Aurelia for transport, rewiring its cargo bay to sustain the androids. The useless, though Mara refused to use that term anymore, helped, moving with slow precision despite their worn bodies. They spoke little, their voices faint and uncertain, but gratitude shimmered beneath every gesture. When the Aurelia finally detached from the solstice dawn, Mara stood at the viewing deck and watched the wreck drift into the black. Dozens of faint blue lights winked from within it, the one she couldn't save. 9042 stood beside her. "You risk everything for us," it said quietly. "Why?" Mara smiled faintly. "Because someone should have, a long time ago. The pursuit. They didn't make it far." 2 days out of Sector 9, the Aurelia scanners picked up incoming signals. Corporate patrols, armed and fast. The Concorde had discovered their transponder trail. Mara ordered the ship into the debris fields, weaving through old wreckage like a dancer in a storm. Plasma fire streaked the dark behind them, lighting up the void like lightning on water. "Engines overheating," Tarek shouted. "We can't outrun them." "Then we fight," Mara said. She armed the ship's defensive drones, though she knew it wouldn't be enough. The Aurelia was a survey vessel, not a warship. As explosions rocked the hull, 9042 approached her at the command deck. "Captain," it said, "we can help. You're not combat ready. You'd be destroyed." 9042's voice was calm. "We were built for war. It is what we understand. Let us protect you, as you have protected us." Before she could protest, 9042 and several others connected directly into the ship's control matrix. Lights flared across the panels as the Aurelia's old systems came alive with new precision. The androids, despite their age, moved with inhuman coordination, optimizing the engines and weapons simultaneously. For the first time, Mara realized they weren't relics. They were extraordinary. The Aurelia dove between two derelict cruisers, firing countermeasures that shattered the corporate drones in a burst of static. Within minutes, the sky was clear again. But victory came with a cost. Power levels dropped dangerously low. The androids who had merged with the ship systems began to flicker, their cores burning out under the strain. Mara rushed to disconnect them, but 9042 stopped her. "It's all right," it said softly. "You gave us a purpose again." And then it went still. Sixth the choice. They reached the free colonies a week later, a cluster of independent stations orbiting the gas giant Erivos. The authorities there were wary at first, but when Mara presented her evidence, the recordings, the living survivors, the council convened an emergency hearing. 4 hours she stood before them, recounting everything. The abandoned synthetics, the decades of silent endurance, the corporate cover-ups. The androids waited in the gallery behind her, silent and motionless, like patient ghosts. When she finished, the chamber erupted in noise. Arguments, disbelief, outrage. One counselor stood and said, "Even if your claims are true, Captain, these constructs are dangerous. The Concord decommissioned them for a reason." Mara faced him squarely. The reason was profit. The murmurs quieted. "They called them useless," she continued, her voice rising. "But they waited for us. For decades, they held on to hope that humanity would remember them. And now that we have, you want to bury them again." "Well, not this time." The council adjourned without a verdict that night, but the message spread through the colonies. Within days, the story of Sector 9's forgotten ignited every network channel. Protesters gathered outside corporate embassies. Independent engineers began designing new energy cores for the rescued synthetics. The Aurelia became a symbol, a ship of the redeemed. 7. The reawakening. Months passed. Mara stayed on Erivos, helping rebuild the one she'd rescued. With the colonists' help, they established a new enclave, Homefield, the first city jointly governed by humans and synthetics. The androids no longer called themselves the useless. They chose a name of their own, the remembered. They worked side by side with humans, repairing ships, teaching navigation, even composing music. Some wrote poetry about the silence of the void. Others simply watched the stars, grateful to see them again. One evening, while overseeing construction at the dockyard, Mara felt a familiar voice behind her. "Captain!" She turned and froze. It was 9042. Its body had been reconstructed from salvaged parts, its core reactivated with a new power cell. The engineers had managed to recover fragments of its consciousness from the Aurelia's databanks. You're alive," she breathed. "Rebuilt," it corrected. "But I remember you." She smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "You always did keep your promises." 9042 looked toward the horizon, where the twin moons of Erivos cast pale light over the growing city. "It is beautiful," it said. "Is this what home feels like?" "Yes," Mara whispered. "This is home." Legacy. Years later, when the corporations finally sent emissaries to negotiate with the free colonies, the remembered were ready. They had built their own fleets, their own voice, their own culture. No longer tools, no longer forgotten. And at the center of it all stood the Aurelia, restored and gleaming, its hull engraved with a single phrase. They called them useless and left them to die, until a human chose to bring them home. Mara Juno never sought fame. She declined every title, every award. She only asked that the remembered be recognized as citizens. Not machines, not property, but people. By the time she passed away, decades later, the remembered had spread across the outer systems, founding colonies of their own. They named one of them Junopolis in her honor. There, beneath a bronze statue of the captain and a single restored android standing side by side, children, human and synthetic alike, learned the story of the ones who were abandoned and the woman who refused to leave them behind. They learned that compassion was not a flaw in the human design, but its greatest feature. And they learned that even in the coldest corners of space, something once thought useless could still shine. 9. Epilogue. Far beyond Derivos, in the ruins of Sector 9, the solstice dawn still drifted through the void. But now it was not silent. Tiny blue lights flickered within the wreck, new power cells installed by the remembered. The forgotten were forgotten no longer. And among them, a small drone named Nim kept watch, transmitting a single signal into the endless dark, a beacon that pulsed with life. It read simply, "We are still here."